back to now. No opportunity wasted. I'm your host, Angelica Ross. And today, today when you're listening, it's April 1st. But today on the for real, for me taping right now, it's March 31st. I am in Washington, D.C., y'all, right now for the Trans Day of Visibility, and I am working double, triple time. I'm exhausted. I am exhausted. I have been up since 5 o'clock this morning, getting ready for the day. So I gave some remarks in front of the Capitol today with the National Center for Transgender Equality, along with some amazing organizations, other folks like Monica Beverly Hills, Hope Giselle, Andrea Jenkins, the Trans Latina Coalition. There was a panel discussion. I also mentioned that on Capitol Hill and talked about the importance for trans people to be registered to vote, and understanding that we all know that we're going to have to do more than vote, but we can't skip this step of voting, and we have to step up and be counted. But the main thing is, if trans people are not registered to vote, then they can't vote for me as the first Black trans president. I'm just saying, I'm not giving no announcement. I'm just saying that could be possible. But if, that comes up in the future and they not registered to vote, you're not registered to vote, then you're not going to be able to vote for me. And maybe, listen, it might not be president yet. Maybe I might start with the, House of Representatives, maybe Congress. I haven't divulged my plans yet. I haven't made my full decisions. I'm pretty sure I do know which office I'm running for, but I won't be announcing until sometime, I believe, in 2025. So stay tuned for that. So now what? Now what's going on? Well, that's what's been going on with me. I'm going to be flying back to Atlanta tomorrow. I just got so many things on my plate. I actually have a meeting tomorrow. Oh my goodness, amazing meeting about a big project that I'm working on. I'm so excited. Some amazing, talented people that I'm working on the project with. So I'm so excited to meet with them tomorrow. But to be honest, y'all, I am exhausted. I'm tired. So we're going to keep this short and sweet, because I have a beautiful, amazing conversation with Raquel Willis coming up. Break out your tissue, baby, because for me, she brought tears to my eyes just so many times. It was just such a beautiful conversation with Raquel. But before we go there, I'm going to start with our Buddhist word for the day from Buddhism Day by Day Wisdom for Modern Life by Daisaku Ikeda. And I've just got to read straight from the book today. And it says, "At all times I think to myself, how can I cause living beings to gain entry into the unsurpassed way and quickly acquire the body of a Buddha?" The Lotus Sutra. So that actually was not a quote from Daisaku Ikeda, but it was a quote from the actual Lotus Sutra saying, "At all times I think to myself, how can I cause living beings to gain entry into the unsurpassed way and quickly acquire the body of a Buddha?" And what they're saying is like, we study the Lotus Sutra to have that heart, to take the vow of the Lotus Sutra, which is, okay, well, every day I want to think to myself, and I do think to myself every day, how can I introduce someone to this life-changing practice? So y'all know I am for real about introducing people to the Buddhist practice, so much that I have a phone number that you can text me at. And I do answer. Ask some of the people. Ask some of the people. I have been responding. I send voice messages. I send very specific messages to each person. But this is only for folks who are interested in me introducing the Buddhist practice. In the podcast, I'm more so introducing the philosophy of Buddhism and sharing those things with you, and sharing some things from our practice. But to actually practice, to actually chant Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, to actually get connected with other Buddhists in your neighborhood, You can text me and I will answer your questions. I will point you to some resources and help you get connected to Buddhists in your community. So you can text me at 404-737-1450 and text the word happy now. If you text the word happy now, then it will specifically hit me in that chain where I know that you want to be introduced into the Buddhist practice. So now, a lot has been going on in the news. I'm just going to touch on a few things. Did y'all see that meme that popped up with Gabrielle Union and Gabrielle Confederacy? I swear, listen, I had to I text Gabrielle. I said, listen, I'm not going to send you this meme that everybody is sending you, but I hope that you are somewhere laughing at this. And, she just sent me all these dead, heads, and so it's like, she's aware of it. And I'm hoping that, she is getting a good kick out of it and laugh. But again, Brittany Packnett Cunningham said the right thing when there was a black hairdresser somewhere that betrayed us. Because Miss Candace was walking around with split ends and ashy edges, and all of a sudden her hair is slicked back and cute, and her makeup is cute, and she looking pulled together. And now all of a sudden she on the Breakfast Club giving interviews, and y'all making her seem like a cuddly, cute black woman when in reality she's a white supremacist. I don't make the rules. Anyway, so that's been going on. Also, Diddy, I know y'all done seen Diddy done got his houses raided. And while he was not there, his sons were there. And you could see it looked like a helicopter or drone footage or something. And it looked like they had the kids in handcuffs. But Diddy wasn't in cuffs. I don't think he's been arrested as of yet. But baby, the clock is ticking. It may not be now, but now will come. No opportunity wasted. You hear me? All right. So like I said, I promise we're going to keep it short and sweet. So let's get into my amazing conversation with my sister friend, Raquel Willis. I am with the brilliant, the beautiful Raquel Willis. Welcome to Now.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on. As soon as you started, a plane flew across my apartment. So
Well, I think we're going to be fine because I did not hear that plane. So I think we are totally fine. So my first question for you, Raquel, is how are you doing right now?
how am I doing right now? It's a mixed bag. I feel different. Like being on this book tour for my memoir, The Risk It Takes to Bloom, has opened up new things in me, unlocked a new kind of vulnerability. And it's interesting. I think a lot of people are, coming to me with like thoughts and conversations about what I've been through and how it impacts their lives. So that feels interesting and weird, but cool. I feel like I accomplished this big thing. So that's really nice. And
It
that
is an
there's kind of
accomplishment. Yes.
a resetting of sorts. Family is good. It's frigid in New York right now. So that's not fun.
Yeah, no, that's why, listen, I'm in Atlanta, Georgia, in my home in Georgia. I know you are very familiar with Georgia weather because you are from, is it Athens, Georgia?
Augusta,
Augusta. I
Georgia.
keep saying, I keep getting them mixed up, but Augusta, Georgia. And we got to learn a lot about your upbringing in Augusta, Georgia in your book,
Hmm.
The Risk It Takes to Bloom. And on this podcast, we talk and kind of contextualize things around the challenges as well
Mm.
as who we had to become in order to rise up to those moments and to those opportunities and overcome those challenges. So I have a two sort of sided question for you to begin with. One, what was the most challenging thing to write about in the
Mm.
book? And what was the most challenging thing to actually live and experience?
Oh, jeez.
Are they the same? Are they not?
I think they're the same, honestly. The most difficult thing to write, hands down, was reckoning with my father's death.
Mhm.
And not just with his death, but with the death to a lot of the expectations he had for me around Black masculinity. So,
Mhm.
being raised as a little Black boy in Augusta, Georgia, meant that there were all of these things that he wanted me to live up to, and that he felt like I needed to live up to have a full, happy life. And, as the queerness started popping off, honey, and then later the transness, it became clear that that was his route and I had to find my own.
Right,
And
right.
so, reckoning with all of that as I was coming into adulthood with his death was heavy. So, I would say
I felt
to
that. Like
to
when I
write and
was
to live.
reading it, I could literally feel all of the emotion, and that's kudos to you as well for being able to write it in such a way that we actually feel or get at least a sense of what you were feeling in those moments and the conflict between, being there at the hospital and being on the Georgia campus, and the difference between, your mother trying to hold it all together for everybody,
Mhm.
and having to deal with her own emotions. And I think so many of us know what that feels like when, well, so many of us as women especially know what that's like when we are having to hold it together for everyone. And thank you too also for reaching out to me to help moderate one of your stops on the book tour when you came here to
Yes.
Georgia. It was such an amazing event. It was so
Mhm.
amazing to see so many people come out and show you so much love. What was it like? Because I know that this stop was particularly special because there were people who showed up from your past. What was that like?
From my past. It was a lot. I mean, being on book tour, I mean, it's one thing to live it, it's one thing to write it, it's one thing to publish it, and then a whole nother to process it publicly. And my first two events in New York were big because those were the first times I think my family was really reckoning with the fact that, oh, she has shared her story on this level, and all the challenges we've been through. Because, Southern Black families, honey, we don't
Yes,
want to be
baby.
airing
Telling the
our
business.
stuff, the
Right, right.
laundry, okay?
What goes
But
on in this house stays in this house.
stays in this house.
Yeah.
But I have to give it up to my family, my mom, my sister, my brother, for being courageous in this journey with me. They've been so supportive of me in writing my story down and sharing my perspective on things. And so getting to Atlanta, I had those kind of under my belt. So by the time I got to Atlanta, I kind of felt like, okay, I know how this is going to go. But every space is different.
Mhm.
And then, of course, having you there, someone that I've admired and looked up to for over a decade, right? Like, I was in college when I first started following you on
Yes, yes.
Tumblr.
You make me feel so young, Raquel. Thank
No,
you.
but
No, no, no. I'm totally listen. I'm totally kidding. And listen, because I have fully stepped into my role as auntie. Let me tell you something. I am auntie to a lot of the children out there, and I accept that. You make me feel so proud, and
Hmm.
you because you I what I feel like is that, there's so much work and sacrifices that so many of us trans women made years ago, and some of us had to shelve portions of our dreams because at the time we were coming up and coming through things, those opportunities just weren't available,
Hmm.
and weren't. a plethora of those things, and it was really hard for us to sort of pioneer these spaces. So to see young trans people like yourself who steam through, who are able to continue to carve a path for yourself and others, but also watching you not take for granted the shoulders that you stand on, and seeing so many of our elders wrap their arms around you, like Miss Major, you know
Mhm.
what I mean? T.S. Madison, and just
Yeah.
all of, Ashley Marie Preston, like you do you know? Do you know that you make us so proud? Like that you not only obviously your mother, who I could see the pride in her eyes when we were at the event, but
Mhm.
are you aware that your aunties and mothers are very very proud of you?
Yes. Yeah, I
Good.
am. And, I wouldn't be me without y'all, right? Without y'all, like, blazing pathways, right? And there's that's why Black trans history is so important to me, because
And
we
thank
for
you for sharing Black trans history the way that you do on social media. Like you're one of the few folks that like really goes in every Black history every year. Now I look forward to seeing,
mm,
the people and the queer and trans folks that you highlight that are pretty sure that the mainstream Black media outlets are not going to be covering.
not going to be covering. And look, I try to get them to invest in this work, and so much of the work that I do, and this, right? The work that we know is important to nourish not only our community, like Black trans community, but our larger communities, Black community, larger LGBTQ plus community, feminist community, if you want to think of it that way. We often just don't have the support. Like, some of
Mhm.
our most
Mhm.
meaningful work has been work that we had to shoulder pretty much on our own, right? Like, so much. Like, I think about how important your portrayal in Pose was, of course, and then of
Thank
course
you.
in American Horror Story. But those are the things that mainstream kind of society saw. Like, I remember seeing you in Her Story, right?
Ah,
And how
yeah, so yeah.
groundbreaking that was to see you doing that work. And of course, knowing your work in the tech industry, right? Building up employment opportunities for our people, you know, and not to like compare these things, right? Because it's all important. But
Absolutely.
mainstream often doesn't see the other gold that's kind of happened along the way.
Yeah.
And that's why when we see each other as Black trans women and folks, it means something entirely different than the world seeing us.
Absolutely, because I think that, you know, when it comes to the world seeing us, a lot of the barriers between the world seeing, truly seeing trans people for who we are, has to do with who's telling the story.
Mhm.
And that's why it is so important to have writers like yourself, who are not just what I love about you as well, particularly is that I'm glad that you penned your story but I will say this, you are young. You are very, very young. And so I am very certain that this is just the beginning of your story.
Mm,
So, there's that. This is this book that we read or whatever is really just the cracking open to the beginning of it. But you are also a writer.
mm,
Like for real. Like meaning like again, I'm gonna write my story, and it's going to, I've already written it actually, and it's as has been in its editing stages. And when we're ready for those things, you are the one that we have reached out to,
mhm,
to edit that book. But I am smart. I can speak and things like that. But I don't fully, I don't fully though consider myself a writer. You, my dear, though,
mm,
obviously have the training, the schooling, have had worked as editors and co-editors for publications. What is that? What does the challenge look like for you as a Black trans woman taking up space in mainstream media publications.
Mm. You know, it's so interesting that you say all of these things that you aren't, because I was literally having this conversation with some friends last night because we were talking about the book. And I was like, y'all, like, it shocks me that I was able to do this and finish this and like commit to finish and have the endurance to go through. Cuz there's a lot of, we've heard it a lot, the imposter syndrome.
Hmm.
And as a black trans woman, right? So all of these different levels, there are so many forces that are conspired against us, honey, to make us feel like we aren't enough, or we aren't smart enough or strong enough
Hmm.
to do these things, or who do we think we are to think that we can do this. And so there was a lot of that along the way, right? Like, I know people see the shine, and you know this, of course, like the
Right.
shine and the accolades and the attention, but we have to be able to give ourselves those pep talks and be like, girl, you gonna do this thing because you done other things, so own it, you can do this. But it's been difficult, and I liken it to, we see a lot of black women, particularly right now, getting their shine, right? Like, we see
Hmm.
Fantasia and The Color
Hmm.
Purple, even
Hmm.
Taraji P Henson
Hmm.
and Danielle Brooks, like, we see them. We even see someone like a Viola Davis, like, or even a Shonda Rhimes, like, or an Ava DuVernay, right? Like,
Yes.
these are women we elevate, but it took them a while. Or an Issa Rae, it took them a while. And it wasn't that they weren't doing
And they're
brilliant things
still talking
before.
about the actual challenges of being in the industry, because I think that a lot of folks are starting to it's really starting to sink in how performative a lot of the allyship was in the past couple of years. And now that these fascist, very conservative, very racist movements have caught wind a little bit, you see
Hmm.
folks trying to see where they can cut allegiances. Can we cut a little on this DEI? Can we cut these? What? And where they can, they
Yeah,
are.
they are.
So, with that being the current state of
Hmm.
the media landscape, where do you see uh where do you see the landscape of narrative telling for black, brown, and
Mm.
queer and trans stories?
Yeah, well, I want to go back really quick, right? Because I mean, you say I'm young, I'm 32, right? And so it's funny because to you, like, I'm
Very
young,
true, very true,
and
very
to like
true.
Gen Z, they see me and I'm in an auntie role to some of them, right? So it's funny that kind of age has completely changed in the last 10
It
years,
really
right?
has. It really has. Cause
Like, so that's the
I
thing.
I just turned 43, and I know now it's that 43 is the new 33. You know what I'm saying? So
Period.
because I could swear you was 22 and not 32. So like I think though that has to deal with though how at generation after generation we are learning to carry a little less baggage with us. We
Hmm.
are healing from generational trauma. We are seeing more of us, even as queer and trans people, access a piece of joy and
Yeah.
access a valuable life, a life worth living. So I think that it's great that we see all of those things, but we can never take the strides for granted. You are someone who seems to constantly speak truth to power and, has been, I mean, on so many stages. And one of the ones I want to bring up for the folks who haven't seen the video, because I know there's video out there of you speaking at the Women's March.
Hmm.
Um, and just talk about for me the growth and sort of the transition of how you've seen the transition of the women's movement to a
Mm.
place where it included someone like you, on the main stage at the Women's March in DC.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I didn't have maybe as much of a barrier as some of our sisters and siblings, because when I was coming into my womanhood, and this is kind of the benefit of educational privilege, I was in this collegiate context. So I was coming into my womanhood and feminism at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so there was always this kind of undergirding of like power in womanhood and femininity and shattering these expectations around gender. But of course, a lot of that was not necessarily the particulars of like queer feminist power, right? Or Black feminist or womanist power. So those were things I had to do my kind of, largely my independent study, although I did have some classes that spoke to these things, but I had to do my own kind of independent study of my own life and the women that were around me that fueled me. Like my mama, my Black Southern Catholic mama, and my sister and my grandmas, they weren't calling themselves feminists.
Right, right.
They were just going after their dreams and saying, "Hey, I'm here. So I want this role and this job, and this man ain't gonna treat me any kind of way. And if he wanna treat me any kind of way, well, I'm gonna do it my damn self." And like strong Black Southern women, and their stories get so erased from what we understand to be power, and particularly feminist
Mm,
power, because
mm-hmm.
they maybe didn't have the access to that language. So I had to understand that those anecdotes, those women that I observed growing up, are just as rich and as sacred of a text as the text that I found in college. Right. So, yeah,
Onto themselves, they are an institution of knowledge.
they
Absolutely.
are. So that was my journey. So then when we get to the Women's March in 2017, I was carrying all of that. And also, I was carrying the knowledge that trans women have been trampled over in larger women's movement. And there really had not been a reckoning around that,
Mm-hmm.
especially for Black trans women, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
we've had some amazing, white trans women articulate these things, like Susan Stryker, amazing historian, or Julia Serrano, another
Yes, we
amazing
love Julia
biologist,
Serrano. Yes,
right?
my
And
goodness.
Whipping Girl with a
Whipping
revelation.
Girl. Listen, and you just brought that up. For those who, if you want to get into queer history and just some brilliant writing, Julia Serrano that Raquel just mentioned is absolutely brilliant. And Whipping Girl was like, girl, that was like
2007
prerequisite.
or
Yeah, and it was
something.
like prerequisite reading though. It was
Hmm.
absolutely mind lifting that you, and
Yeah.
it's amazing that you mentioned that, and having and building up to this moment. And again, not to just harper on age, but okay, 2017, now we are talking about 20s, and just you having such a command and a courage to stand in front of that. And I know you talked about some of the nerves and things like that that you were able to sort of pull together in that moment. Where do you see though the gap between, because I love it that I hear you speaking to the intersections of our mainstream folks that we need to get on board.
Hmm.
Where do you think the gap is within the LGBT community when it comes to being in true allyship and solidarity with trans people?
Ciao.
Right, exactly.
Well, I think the first thing I will say is our folks have to stop being so damn afraid to talk about the history of segmenting of our movement.
Yes, yes,
Yes,
yes,
we
yes.
see the trans exclusionary radical feminists, many of them are cisgender lesbians, and we see these ridiculous drop the T kind of conversations. Those are happening, but the real dynamic that continues to happen is the sidelining of particularly Black trans leadership. you
Whew.
know?
Yeah.
And that is a
Sidelining.
historical dynamic that didn't just pop up out of thin air. It and the right is not the source. I mean, let's be clear. The right is not the source. They've just taken advantage of it. But when we look at the history of gay political lobbying in the United States, some of our key figures in the 70s, particularly this guy named Steve and Dean, who was one of the original leaders of human rights campaign, made it clear that he wanted to focus on well-to-do cisgender, mostly gay men, but also lesbians, right? Who could assimilate. And he did not want to include the freaks, which he included trans people and drag performers even, right?
But you know what I can appreciate about that? What I can appreciate about that is, because I didn't know about this, but he sounds like someone who I appreciate that you at least tell me up front what it is, because when I
That's
tell
real.
you that what you're describing to me is, I think, an unspoken reality, attitude, and perception that has been behind a lot of LGBTQ organizational leadership, who
Mm-hmm.
for years were, most of them were gay and lesbian centers, gay and lesbian movements. And they would just, there were moments I even see, I don't know if you remember throughout history where, whether it was Don Lemon, being at conversations with him and him just roping trans people into gay folks as if it's the same thing. And I remember
Yeah.
seeing activists like saying to him, listen, we need to make sure you understand, no, it's not the same thing. So it's
I mean, but that's real. No, I think that that's absolutely real. I think what we see now is people having to profess that they are more understanding of trans folks' experiences than maybe they really are.
yeah.
So you'll talk about trans people and particularly the murders of trans women of color in speeches at your galas and in your grant proposals or whatever, but you don't actually have pipelines of leadership for trans people in your organization. So, and I'll be clear, and I'll say this because it's real, and not that some of the leaders of some of these national nonprofits are not deserving or whatever, right? But we're in an era now where people will have to talk about trans people politically because we're the hot button issue. That's something that they did not anticipate when they were
Mhm.
pushing for assimilation and focusing only on gay marriage. They didn't think about what happened next
Mhm.
and how they were going to use us to get attention for their efforts. But we're now in an era where people don't want, for instance, cis white gay men in leadership at their organizations, but they also don't want trans people, and particularly of color, at the head of their organizations, despite the work that we've been doing for decades.
Well, that
So
has
where
a
they've
lot to do with them not being able to follow Black leadership either. Like, I've had that experience when I came up doing trans tech.
mm-hmm,
Like, even whether it was working with other organizations or they're trying to hire folks into trans tech, there will eventually be clashes with the fact where I'm leading into radicalness, and they almost are undermining everything that I do because they don't believe I'm even qualified to lead.
yeah, no, that's real. But what we find in this era right now is the compromise is that they can maybe move forward and have like a Black cisgender queer person, and particularly a Black cisgender queer woman, be the head.
I know. I
But they
listen.
can't go further than that.
I'm getting what you're putting down. And and I think that this comes down to also a almost similar conversation that Hollywood has when it comes to
Hmm.
hiring trans talent, is they be like, "Well,
Yeah.
I don't know nobody. I don't see nobody." And a lot of that is a mixed bag, I think. It's a mixed bag of, one, there being this real thing of Black trans women not having access to institutions to have the designations of things that they're particularly looking for, whether that is education, whether that is, a certain experience. Some of us, again, even like myself, if I were to go back into leading, organizations and doing those things, I'm sure there are a lot of people who feel like I'm not qualified.
Yeah.
You understand what I'm saying? Because I don't have
Despite
certain,
all that you've done. Yeah.
despite all the results of
Mhm.
the things and learning from things. Because one thing that I learned mostly about being the right person or right, being right in the situation is that a lot of times when people are trying to create a solution for a situation, it's so many times with the perception from the outside in. And
Optically.
and that is what the problem I think has been at the heart of our LGBTQ umbrella and the services that we have, is that those who serve our communities serve it from a perception uh,
Mhm.
of the outside. Even though
Yeah.
we're an LGBTQ thing, that's different, and we're not really in, so they don't really stand in solidarity, don't really fully understand. And there's always this line between the office and the waiting room, or whatever, where I belong back here and you belong there on this side of services. And when we get on the other side of things and start making rooms and start showing mediocrity, exposing mediocrity, and start exposing a lack of real will to serve our communities equally,
Mhm.
because you and I both know that across this LGBTQ movement, that there was an unbalanced weight when it came to the fight for marriage equality, and so many of us were ringing the alarm saying, hey, we got to include and tack us in here from the beginning. Otherwise, once we get marriage equality, folks are going to pack up into their condos, apartments, and homes, and
Yeah.
that's it. And it's going to be a wrap. And for the most part, the onslaught that we have seen against the trans community has been mainly because the front line, a lot of that front line that was there for marriage equality is
It's
gone.
gone. It's gone. That's real. I mean, I guess, and this may be a bit reductive or simplistic, but I feel like the fatal failure of this kind of old paradigm is insisting that we need to present as if we're just like cis straight people. I think the real and more powerful opportunity is we need cisgender straight people to understand that they're just like us, in the sense of we're all failed by these restrictive notions of who we should be. There is no perfect portrait anymore of, this cis straight man and woman couple with, their 2.5 kids and like this kind of American dream. That doesn't really exist. I mean, you see it
Mhm,
in the increased
mhm,
divorce rates. You see it in this ire between men, cisgender men, and cisgender women. And a lot of this is about their insecurities around their identities and who they're supposed to be in this world, because they're trying to fit this script that we shredded up a while ago. And look at us, and they can't stand that many of us are figuring out how to thrive outside of that script, because they were
oof,
promised and entitled to a full life because of that script, and it's not actually happening.
ooh. Now, when I tell you that you just said a whole word, y'all, I know y'all gonna be unpacking that one. So, listen, and so I want to say, first of all, Raquel, thank you so much for sharing your time and space and brilliance with us here, with Now and No Opportunity Wasted. So, with this book,
Hmm.
The Risk It Takes to Bloom, I know that what's obviously wonderful and great is that you are here to be a model and pioneer, and someone can actually, that is also trans, and Black trans women can pick up your book and see themselves, feel camaraderie around experience, and different things. But what I love about this book and what I know about great art is that
Mm,
the specific speaks to the universal. And
mm-hmm.
so when we talk about the risk it takes to bloom, and when I just heard you talk about the challenges that, cis people have to be authentic and to live as free as sometimes we do, what is the main message from you from this book, The Risk It Takes to Bloom, to everybody?
I mean, the main message is just air that shit out, honey. Like the insecurities, the trauma, the fears that you have, we all have those. Can we just be real about them? Can we talk about them? And then maybe there's something on the other side that's more beautiful. Maybe there's some healing that can come. And that is what I've been able to do at various points in my life. And that I think queer and trans people do, right? So many of us have to walk through the fire
Mhm.
to be ourselves on the other
Mhm.
side. We have to
Mhm.
risk it all. Risk
Mhm.
losing family, risk losing housing, risk losing dreams of whatever type of career. And yet, there's opportunity for a lot of us on the other side if we can find the resources, if we can find community to lean on to have something more beautiful on the other side. Yeah, it might not look like what we were told it was supposed to look like. That is fine.
Mhm. Mhm.
That is beautiful because your life is unique. No one can prophesy for you but some kind of higher power, some kind of higher force, right? So I'm listening to that force that I actually believe is innate instead of all of these folks who actually don't have their ducks in a row, as my mama would say.
Absolutely. So, and before we go to, I want to, thank you so much for just for your time. Before we go, no opportunity wasted. You know, the context of this podcast comes from my Buddhist faith.
Mm-hmm.
But what I love that I've learned from Buddhism, I mean, and there's just so many things that I just get goosebumps every time I think about it. But, we say that Buddhism is reason.
Mm.
And that's what I love so much about the spiritual practice is there are ways for me to acknowledge uh the spiritual journey of other people because I can understand the reason and the reasoning, especially
Mm-hmm.
when you are leaning on something and a power higher than yourself, or rooting yourself in a spiritual foundation. Reading your book, The Risk It Takes to Bloom, it was obvious your foundation
Yeah.
in church and spirituality, but being a Black trans woman, how did you
Mm-hmm.
hold on to that faith?
Yeah, I mean, I think what the Catholic Church most gave me maybe was a skepticism of institution. But it did also give me a sense of volunteerism and stewardship, right? Like, how can I be of service to this larger human family, if you will, right? So those are things that I gained from Catholicism. But honestly, I think the mixture of losing like my father and my grandma at such pivotal points and having to figure out, okay, well, what is my connection and relationship to them beyond the physical presence, because I don't have
Mhm.
that anymore. That
Mhm.
transformed me
Mhm.
spiritually. I think also, of course, as a Black trans woman who has these elders that I'm not biologically related to, but their stories and their voices and their power has resonated years down the road from me. I've been able to choose them as my ancestors, right? Because the idea of chosen family, we know in queer community
Mm.
exists, but we get to choose who our ancestors are too.
Mhm.
And so I've
Mhm.
chosen Marsha. I've chosen
Mm.
Sylvia. I've chosen Crystal LaBeija, chosen the Lady Chablis, chosen Monica Roberts. and
Mm-hmm.
beautifully was able to know her in my life, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm. Girl, you're gonna make
that
me cry. Yes, you know, because
but
you are so right.
that's it. And so I think knowing that, there has to be something else that bounds us beyond the physical is there. And the last thing I will say is, I mean, we talk about gaydar and queerdar and transdar. Um, I think those are the fundamentals for seeing the story beyond maybe the story that someone can tell us.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a
Mm-hmm.
connection when you see someone on the street and you're like, oh, they're a little bit different, right? And it's not in a shady sense.
No.
It's in a like, I know that there's a universe behind those eyes. Whether I get to know it, I get the privilege of knowing it or not, I'm going to at least acknowledge that it's there
Yes.
and that it's beautiful and it needs to be protected.
Ooh. Yes. I mean, I that's Raquel, let me tell you, I first of all, I love you. Second
I
of
love you
all,
too.
I have to say the thing that I love, like I don't even say most because I don't even want to be in the era of not even coming close to acknowledging your greatness. But what I will say is, as someone who is 43,
Mm,
who is about a decade older than you, uh, the way I look to you,
mm,
uh, for new knowledge, for new information, for a new way, for new perspective, for to feel alive in the sense that when you've been here a while and you've been having the same conversations and in the same movement and seeing the same things and when you've been here a while and seeing the depth of it, you might not have as much of that new perspective that
mhm.
still sees the longevity of where we have to go and where we can get to. I just have to say that thank you, and I appreciate how you show up and continue to make yourself available, not just for community, but make yourself available
Mm,
as an instrument for healing, as an instrument for joy and love, that we can see all these reflections into you. Just know that people like myself, and I know even older, are receiving so much value from you. And I hope that we can continue, you and I, as well as more folks within our community, start to continue to amplify and strengthen these relationships that we have between our generations, because between us
yeah, yeah.
is an institution of knowledge.
Come on.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you
But
so
you know
much. Oh,
what?
go ahead.
I
Yes, yes.
have to say, I mean, I can only imagine because there are times where I'm like, oh, we still having these conversations, child. I was talking about that like 6 years ago, and so there's like a whole new crop, particularly of like social media voices so that's the thing. But we're always new, right? And I think that jadedness that may come, right? And because we all feel it, I
Yeah,
felt it,
trust me.
but
Yes.
it's like it's because it's a drain because it's taken culture so long in our lifetime to like catch up to what we were saying maybe 3 chapters ago,
Yeah.
right? But that jadedness is not a reflection of you know what you're saying being passe or done. It just meant that you were ahead of your fucking time.
Thank you.
And you will continue to be because we continue to evolve and generate new thoughts and dreams, right? So we just got to have our pep talk and give each other our pep talks because the foundation is there, right? I'm on your
Yes.
yellow brick road, honey.
Yes, yes, yes. Oh my goodness. Well, thank you so much for being the light. Thank you for taking the risk to bloom and showing us how it's done.
Of course. Thank you.
We'll be right back. Raquel, thank you so much for just being you, for taking the risk to bloom, for showing people that the risk is worth it. Whew. All right, so before we go, I'm going to just drop a little Buddhist breadcrumb. All right, so remember when I was talking to you about the world of hell? Well, now I want to talk to you about the world of hunger. And for that, I'm actually going to read directly from the SGI website, sgi-usa.org. You can Google the 10 worlds and this will all come up. But the world of hungry spirits or hunger is characterized by overwhelming desires and the suffering that comes from those desires going unfulfilled. The Japanese term gaki, translated as hungry spirit or hungry ghost, originally referred to the dead. This is because the dead were thought to be in a constant state of starvation. The world of hunger is a condition in which our mind and body burn with constant, intense craving. Nichiren Daishonin writes, the realm of hungry spirits is a pitiful place where, driven by starvation, they devour their own children. He also says greed is the world of hungry spirits. To be hungry to the point of devouring one's own children is to be ruled by the misery of craving that knows no bounds. Desire in itself, we say, is neither good or bad. Without a sense of hunger, when our bodies need nourishment, we would starve to death. Desires and wants can provide impetus for self improvement, for human advancement. In the world of hunger, however, we are unable to use desires creatively. We become slaves to our desires and suffer as a result. So, also, I'm going to drop a little other seed with you. There was a book that I read called The Realm of Hungry Ghosts, and it was by a doctor who is known to be the father of the harm reduction model, which is basically an alternative to folks who are dealing with addiction, where folks that are trying to go abstinence and it's not working. The harm reduction model is an alternate model that works for some folks. And in Canada, they created these like methadone clinics that help to deal with folks, who help folks get their fix that were dealing with that addiction, but understanding that it really broke down certain things, that some people are in a state of constant craving that cannot be. That's why he calls it in the realm of hungry ghosts. And so it's unfortunate, but some people are going to always maybe have a certain chemical inclination. It's not all people or what have you, but instead of like being disappointed in certain people, we should wrap around them with certain care that makes them not have to steal or create acts of violence to have to feed themselves. Because like it says in the world of hungry spirits, they're willing to eat their own. And we see sometimes with people with addictions, they're willing to sell their kids sometimes for a fix. So know that there is a way out. There is a way out of the world. We as Buddhists believe there's a way out of the world of hell. There's a way out of the world of hunger. And that is by looking towards the positive sides of what hunger is and kind of getting into a state where it's okay to have a hunger for life and go after things, but do it responsibly, do it with wisdom, do it with compassion for others and with respect to the environment that you're in. All right, y'all. So it's been a long, long day. I am tired. I am going to take this makeup off and go to bed. Thank you for listening. I want you to all please subscribe to our podcast on every platform. Go to YouTube, subscribe. I gotta get my subscribers up, y'all. I know y'all watching. I know y'all seeing the clips on Instagram, but I need you to cross over and to just hit that subscribe button on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or YouTube, wherever you would like to watch and take in podcasts. Please subscribe to now. No opportunity wasted. And I'll see you next week.